Swear you didn't do it.
In Kyle Wilkins' speech, he claimed that it is necessary to pass Prop 30 in order to keep college tuition down. Many people here probably think if Prop 30 is passed, college tuition will not increase or actually decrease. This is not true because Prop 30 will not increase or decrease tuition, as I'll explain now. As the California School Board Association pointed out, Prop 30 does not provide new funding for schools. Instead, it bolsters the general fund with new revenue, and as the independent legislative analyst wrote in the official title and summary, these additional revenues would be available to fund programs in the state budget. In Kyle's first secondary claim, he states Prop 30 will stop $6 billion in cuts to our school this year. While Prop 30 might prevent cuts from school, it would certainly raise sales and income taxes on all Californians as much as $50 billion over the next 7 years. Kyle states it will prevent cuts from schools such as Cal Poly and Warner. However, Prop 30 doesn't include a single cut the Sacramento politicians are threatening. Sacramento politicians in their budget choose to cut schools rather than cutting waste, eliminating bureaucracy, and cleaning up the budget in order to try and keep voters to support their massive tax increase. The reality is that Prop 30 is a shell game created by Sacramento politicians. It doesn't guarantee new fundings for schools. The California School Board Association pointed out that the governor's initiative does not provide new funding for schools. Instead of Prop 30, politicians can take existing money for schools and use it for other programs and then replace the money with the new taxes. The official title and summary of Prop 30 states that these additional revenues would be available to fund programs in the state budget. It is clear that Prop 30 is just another budget gimmick. Kyle states in his secondary claim that Prop 30 will generate $6.7 billion a year for California. This is not true, and the politicians behind Prop 30 can't keep track of the money they have, the award pay raises to staff, spend billions on the bullet train to nowhere, and refuse to reform wasteful spending. Kyle states that Governor Jerry Brown assures no raise in taxes to the middle class, and that it will only affect 1% of Californians. This is absurd because all Californians will be affected by increasing the current sales tax over $1 billion a year to a nation's highest 8.4%. A sales tax increase will hurt California families and raise the price on everything from gas to clothes, items they need every day. Income taxes for individuals and small businesses will increase by up to 32%. With Prop 30 revenues, the state expects to set a record for a total budget spending at $142.4 billion, surpassing the $138 billion budget in the pre-recession of 07 through 08. Prop 30 creates even bigger budget problems down the road by financing permanent state spending with temporary and violent tax increases. Prop 30 will not help California revenue in any way. Kyle states in his last secondary claim that Prop 30 will benefit the children's future in being a college graduate and gives a personal example. However, it has nothing to do with Prop 30, for Prop 30 will just increase more taxes that college students will pay. Kyle also restates the same claim that Prop 30 will help reduce cuts. Prop 30 doesn't include any reforms. Schools already get more than $40 billion per year, almost half the state budget, but studies showed that up to 50% of that money doesn't make it into the classroom. Politicians claim they can't properly fund schools without higher taxes, yet education spending has increased. K through 12 spending will grow by $1.2 billion without Prop 30. That is an increase of $610 per pupil. In conclusion, the truth is that politicians and special interests behind Prop 30 threaten voters by saying, vote for our massive tax increase or we'll take it out on your school. However, politicians won't reform the education or pension system. Their only solution is to raise taxes and spend more. And the reality is, as long as you keep sending them, they will keep spending the money. Thanks.
Okay, the advocate's claim is labeled. You've got a couple of counterclaims that you're going to be arguing in those points. That's fine. The general position is that it really is not designed to address the schools, but bolster the general fund, and then supposedly the schools will benefit as a consequence on that. And I think you explained that reasonably well. You label the first point, talking about the cuts and that it's a tax increase. Those sorts of things. I think that's okay. The phrase shell game is one of those things that I think is interesting because there's a lot of language in your whole argument that sounds like it's talking points right out of the California budget or the California voters guide. I know that the opponents of Prop 30 have used some of the same terminology that you're using, and I don't mind that you present the counterclaim, but I think you need to explain the argument and provide your evidence for those points, and sometimes you just give us this long list of assertions on the point. For instance, on the second point, right after you talk about how much money it's going to result in annually in increasing costs, you make a reference, we got the high-speed train, there aren't any reforms, we're wasting all this money, blah, 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 blah. And that's a whole series of claims that somebody has made, but there's no evidence on any of it, and you're just repeating those claims, and so it doesn't do you any good in advancing the issue that you're talking about. I think the stronger argument that you have comes a little bit later on this point, which actually it's toward the end, which is that we get $40 billion a year for education. It's almost half of the budget that we're spending. That K through 12, even with the proposed budget that we have, they're getting $1.2 billion more than they had the previous year, and that it's $610 more per pupil than the previous year, even with the supposed cuts that they're talking about. That, I think, is a good argument to make. That's relatively clear, and then it lets us make a comparison there. Other things just kind of get obscured with that other stuff, and I think that misses the point. There are good arguments in that context. What is missing, I think, is a more useful analysis of the advocate's evidence, because I think the advocate did a lot of the same things too. In essence, they, here are the bullet points for the advocates on the California voters guide on Prop 30, and let me see if I can get this to shoehorn it in and fit as a claim of fact. And as a consequence, I don't think that the arguments got necessarily as well explained. If you addressed the arguments that the advocate actually made and said, look, he said this, but he didn't provide any evidence, or the one piece of evidence he provided comes from this particular source, and this is the source that wrote this thing, and here's what they themselves say about this, then I think you'd have a stronger argument. I don't object to, like I said, you guys, when you go out and do research, you find arguments. I mean, that's the whole point of it. But making somebody else's argument yours is not the same thing as building your own argument. And I think that we got a little bit too much of that here. All right, thank you. From both